Dr. Stanley Ambrose, a local scholarship student, graduated from the National University of Ireland, Galway, with an honor degree in Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, and Bachelor of Obstetrics. She also received an international baccalaureate from Mara College Banting before pursuing her career in medicine. She completed her hospital training at Cork University Hospital and Cork University Maternity Hospital before returning to work with Ministry of Health in Singapore. Currently, Dr. Ambrose is pursuing a career in the pharmaceutical industry as a medical manager for Roche Malaysia Sdn Bhd. She currently works extensively in the oncology department and lead pharma medical compliances at Roche Malaysia Sdn Bhd. Dr. Ambrose is also member of Malaysian Medical Council, Singapore Medical Council, and Irish Medical Council. Now, I would like to invite Yang Berbahagia, Dr. Stephanie Ambrose, to deliver her keynote speech for the 4th IMS Dean List Team Interprofessional Advocacy. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor.
Hi, good morning everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Thank you, Dato, for the introduction. And to everyone here present today, to the faculty, the deputy deans, the lecturers, as well as all the students here today, it's honestly an honor and a privilege to be with you celebrating, the awards that you're getting to celebrate your achievement. And I'm not so sure whether you've heard what a medical manager does, but I certainly hope that the topic that I'm going to deliver to you today is something that is relevant, that might be useful to you in the future once you graduate. Because I always feel that there are endless of opportunities out there. There are some people who take the traditional path, but there are some people who try to explore different paths to, so many other opportunities, especially those with a science background. Okay, so before I dive into my topic for today, which is the theme I was given is interprofessional. Oh, sure. Okay, I'll just stand a little bit to the side so I can have a look at the screen as well. Before I dive into my topic, the theme I was given is interprofessional advocacy. When I received the theme, initially I was thinking, oh, this is so me, because I really moved out of clinical practice and I did something that was very different. At the time, traditionally with parents and so on, you tell them, Mom, I don't want to be a doctor anymore, I'm going to now move into the pharmaceutical industry. And for them, it's like, what are you talking about? What is the pharmaceutical industry? So, I definitely had to explain to them why, and I'll bring you through a few of my slides on why I chose this path. And I have to say something as well. My biggest supporter who's here today, my husband, Michael, was actually the main reason why I took, I wouldn't call it a risk, but I took this risk of trying to pursue something that is different out of the norm that a doctor would do. Okay? So before I go into my slides, you can see, I hope it's quite clear, but you can see up here, okay, these 3 circles. It's not something that I just simply pulled out of the internet, like, because it looks good or anything. No, it means something. To me, if you're interested and you understand what interests you have, then you have to really pursue the opportunities. And how you do that is you need to take actions for it. You cannot hope that someone will come and say, hey, this is an opportunity, do you want it? Nothing in life is like that. You have to pursue yourself, and that's what I believe. Okay? So what I'm going to do is just run you through the outline of the presentation I have for today, alright? I briefly introduce myself, okay? Secondly, I'm just going to take you through my career journey. So what I've worked as and where am I today, okay? Next thing is my endeavor outside of clinical practice, which is in the pharmaceutical industry, alright? I will talk about what the pharmaceutical industry is about. And lastly, I'm going to touch on Roche Healthcare because that's where I'm from and I'm representing Roche. Okay? And to be honest, if you have any questions in between, go ahead, or if you want to keep it to the very end, I'm okay as well. Alright? So just talking about my career path. Okay? So as mentioned earlier, I received a scholarship after my SPM to pursue my international bachelorate at Mara College, Banting. Alright? Thereafter, I received another full scholarship to pursue my career in medicine at the National University of Ireland in Galway. And when I came back, I actually had the opportunity to work with 3 different ministries of health. So I worked with the Ministry of Health in Malaysia, I worked with the Ministry of Health in Ireland, they're called the Health Service Executive, and I also had the chance to work with the Ministry of Health in Singapore. Okay? And thereafter, I moved to Roche. But I won't touch too much of what I've done in Roche or what I'm doing in Roche because I'll bring you through the next few slides about it. Okay? But with Roche, I had a great opportunity to work with different societies and different organizations. I only have a few listed down here, but I will bring you through a couple of them later. Okay, so the question was, why did I explore? Why did I come out of the norm of doing clinical practice? Now, I won't touch on what clinical practice is because I'm sure all of you are very familiar with what a doctor does in terms of diagnosing the patient, treating the patient, following up with the patient or family. Okay? So why did I explore? The main thing was cancer or oncology. Now, this is something that's quite dear to me. I mean, I definitely had friends, I had few family members who had cancer, and I always wondered, what else can I do besides just seeing these patients in the hospital and saying, these are the treatment that you need. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to venture out, to think what are the other opportunities that I can do to help these patients. So one of the things was I had an interest in research and development of the medication, not just giving the patient the medication. Okay? I also had interest in clinical trials. I've assisted in running clinical trials, but I was never, really a part of the whole journey, like selecting the site, selecting the principal investigator, following through with the patient's treatment. I was never a part of it when I was practicing as a doctor. Okay? Next thing is access and policy. So I always had this thing, a lot of patients, they don't have access to medicine. So what else can we do? How do we now change the policies here in Malaysia, or when I was in Singapore? And lastly, what was always in my mind was patient. I'm a very patient-centric person. So be it working in the hospital or coming out, I wanted to do something for the patients. Next, just to bring you through why cancer. Okay, so I have a few statistics here. Okay, I've taken the one from the UK, the US, as well as our local data. So if you have a look here, I think, it's not appearing. So, appearing there, but basically, in this part of the world, when patients are diagnosed with cancer, about 60 to 70% of them actually die. And a lot of reasons contribute to it, and I will show you in my next slide. But most of the time it's because of access, okay? And in part, like for example, in the US, where there are loads of clinical trials, or in the UK, you only see a mere 30 to 40% of patients, dying because of cancer. So there are a lot more help that's needed in this part of the world, okay? Okay. So as mentioned earlier, if you look at the facts and the figures, you can see here in Malaysia, for example, I've just highlighted there, out of 37,000, for example, who are diagnosed, about 21,000, so that's like almost 60% of patients actually die. There are a number of reasons to it. But what I've highlighted in my next slide is why is it a growing number today? So the main thing is definitely access. Access is an issue. These patients do not have access to, the latest novel therapies, for example. example, we're all used to hearing about chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Now they are the standard of care for oncology patients. But what we are actually moving now into is targeted therapy, meaning that if you have a particular mutation, then you give a personalized treatment for this patient. Okay, and we're now from targeted therapy actually moving into immunotherapy. I'm not sure if any of you have heard about immunotherapy, but it's basically to get your immune system to fight the cancer. So we've come a long way from chemotherapy. Okay, next thing is awareness. Now we know people with science background, we know what cancer is, but a lot of the patients, they don't even know what cancer is, how it happens. They don't know it's associated with, familial history, for example. So they don't know how to, tell their children or their children's children, that, this is how it happens, these are the tests that we need to do so that we can capture it as soon as possible and treat it. So we always think that, people know about these things, but actually they do not. A lot of people from the rural area especially, it's really foreign to them when you say the word cancer. And lastly is the lifestyle. A lot of association of cancer. We know smoking causes lung cancer. That is something that we've heard time and time again. But there are other reasons that causes cancer. The things that you eat, some workers being exposed to asbestos, for example. So all these kind of things contribute to cancer, and that's why it's a growing number today. And it all leads back to the awareness because they're not sure what causes cancer. Okay. So I asked myself, how can I make this difference? I mean, being in the hospital, yes, it's definitely a great thing that you're a doctor diagnosing and treating these patients, but I always felt that there's more to it. Okay? So what I did was, I ventured into looking at what can I do more, and I looked into the pharmaceutical industry. Okay? Now what I have here is just a couple of pharmaceutical companies, but trust me, there are about 100 over pharmaceutical companies. But I just highlighted a few which I had applied to. Reason being is because they are very strong in their oncology pipeline. And what I mean is they have a lot of oncology products, they have a lot of initiatives in driving oncology today. So I was very fortunate because I was accepted to work at Roche as a medical manager 4 years ago, and this was back in 2011, so almost 5 years. So just a little bit of a background about Roche, alright? So it was founded in 1896 in Basel, Switzerland, and that's our HQ now, alright? It's the world's largest biotech company. And what I mean here is that we design treatment which are personalized to the patient, okay? If you have that mutation, this is the drug that you're going to take. So this is how our company works. 2/3 of our research and development are with companion diagnostic, meaning that the patient comes in, we take their tissue or we take their blood sample, and we try to trace what sort of treatment they need. So everything is about personalized treatment today, alright? We have been the forefront of cancer treatment and research for more than 50 years now, alright? And we have over 100 different affiliates worldwide. And lastly, we are the top 5 pharmaceutical company in the world. Now, just to give you a kind of understanding of what I do as a medical manager, and maybe, a few of you may pursue this path once you all graduate, because we do have medical doctors, we do have a lot of people with many science backgrounds, biomedical science, all kinds of sciences, alright? So in medical affairs, what's really important is that we actually educate physicians today, okay? Now, scientific communications of the clinical trials and clinical data that we have with whatever treatment that we have in our company is what we actually share with physicians. So we work a lot with healthcare professionals. So be it if they're oncologists or they're nurses or they're pharmacists, we work with all of them in terms of educating them. Next thing is we educate them not just on novel therapies, but for example, if someone is taking a particular treatment and they have side effects, we are the ones who actually go in and speak to them on how to manage the side effects. So we do have contact with patients as well, all right, and the patient's families. Next is we are always attending oncology conferences. We attend international, regional, and also local oncology conferences just to keep ourselves abreast with all the treatment that's out there today which are new and improving and innovative. Alright? Now the next thing is publications and journals. As a medical manager, we do a lot of education in publication as well. So I'll just put all three of them out here. You've heard of health today, you've heard of NIMS. So we do a lot of write-up about disease, any campaign awareness like breast cancer awareness, for example, or cervical cancer awareness, any sort of awareness. We put it into NIMS and Health Today and many other publications so that we shed awareness to the public as well as the physicians. Now next is, just to give you an overview of what happens when a drug comes into Malaysia. So once a drug gets approved by FDA in the US and also the European EMA, we have our local registration standards by the Drug Control Authority. Okay? So once the drug is registered, it can be available to the public through the physicians. However, some of these drugs, especially oncology drugs, because there's so much research and development and a lot of money put into this to develop the drug, these drugs are expensive. So our job, for example, as a medical manager like myself from Roche, what I would do is come up with a health economic model. We work with the Ministry of Health to ensure that patients are getting the best drug at an affordable price. So they're actually funding from the ministry, but we have to justify in the model that we derive that the outcomes and the cost, there's a balance to it. So you wouldn't want to give someone an expensive drug where the overall survival is just a couple of months. So then, might as well the patient just be on chemotherapy. You want something that is going to give you years added to your overall survival. So this is something that we do as a medical manager as well. Right? So the next is the government agencies that we work with and also other medical association and primary care organizations. So this is, to be honest, just to name a few. We work with the National Cancer Society of Malaysia, we work with Together Against Cancer, we work with the Breast Cancer Association, but there are loads more that I didn't put on my slide. For example, Empowered is for colorectal cancer. But what we actually do as a medical manager is when we work with this organization, we speak to patients. So what we want to do is for them to really understand not just treatment, but what the disease is about, what kind of investigations you can do, and what sort of treatment you can get. Okay? And through these organizations as well, we don't just work with patients, we work with the caretakers. And the reason being is the caretakers is just as important as the patients, because they are their biggest support, number one. And number two, we've all heard it. If you've been, we are also patients ourselves, cold, flu, all these kind of things. And we are sometimes not compliant with our medication. We don't take it on time, right? And sometimes we skip our medication. So what we are here for is to educate the caretakers as well. This is how the medication is supposed to be taken, because sometimes these oncology drugs are not easy to take. They may cause side effects that may deter patients from continuing the treatment. So we need to ensure that they really fulfill taking, on time, whether it's with food or without food. So all these kind of things are actually educated to both the caretaker and as well as the patients themselves. Okay? And besides that, for Roche, we also fund a lot of the awareness campaigns. So you've heard of cervical cancer, again going back to cervical cancer, but cervical cancer vaccination, pap smear, for example, breast cancer, breast check, all these kind of things. So we fund all these awareness campaigns. Now, one thing that I mentioned in my previous slide as well, that I'm really interested in clinical trial, and being a medical manager at Roche gave me an opportunity to not only design the clinical trial, to see what sort of patients should be on that clinical trial, because sometimes you have a lot of the global trials whereby a niche group of patients are not included. But then when you come to Malaysia, suddenly you see, actually it would fit this group of patients. So what we do is, we design the trial, we work with the principal investigator, we select the site that we want to do the trial, because they need to be well equipped to follow these patients through from beginning to the end. And we also follow the patients through, we collect adverse events data, we make sure that these patients, we don't just collect the data, but we address these adverse events. So this is what we do in a clinical trial setting. Okay? This is actually my last slide, but I'm going to concentrate a little bit more on this slide, but I have 2 more slides. The one after this is a 6-minute video. I hope you don't mind, but that video really tells us about what we do at Roche and certainly other pharmaceutical companies as well. I really do hope you appreciate the video as much as I do. We have a lot of videos as such, but this one is really important and I feel would be meaningful to all of you to understand what we do at Roche and why we do it, okay? And lastly, I would like to end with a quote. So for this slide, I would like to take a little bit more time, but it's called collaboration. And one thing I really like about being in the corporate world now, so being in the pharmaceutical industry as a medical manager, you're in the corporate world, right? Is that you get to work with different functions. When I was in the medical practice, you work with people with medical background, right? So, I mean, yes, it will be fulfilling for a lot of people, but for me, I was very happy and I'm still happy working cross-functionally with all of these different departments. For example, with the sales and marketing team, I feel that it built to my skills because they are very creative and innovative in coming up with a lot of tactics, okay? And then you have your regulatory and quality affairs. Regulatory are those pharmacists, for example, anyone with medical background who brings in and gets the drug registered in Malaysia, all right, or in other parts of the world. But so for here is they get the drug registered with the DCA, the Drug Control Authority in Malaysia, and then you get it listed in the Ministry of Health of Malaysia, all right. And then you have quality affairs, and they are there to ensure that the product is of good quality. There's no damage. It's stored at a certain temperature, for example. So that's how I work with the medical affairs team, but they are a branch of regulatory as well as quality. Okay. Next is drug safety. Drug safety is definitely a very important group of people because they are the ones who ensure that doctors report the adverse events, we collect the data and we address it. Okay. So for example, if the patient takes one of our drugs and they have a rash, okay, we cannot sit it lying there and not address it. We will actually go to the doctor and say, can I speak to your patients or can I do an education? So we go there and do a continuous medical education, a CME for example, so that everyone understands how to manage rash. That's just an example. Alright? Next thing is finance. So what really added to the skills that I have today is budget management. So you know when you work in clinics, you don't have any budget that you manage unless you're the owner of the clinic, alright? But finance is something that we manage because we have our own campaigns. We do the publication as a medical manager. We have head counts, for example, to manage. So budget